If you're considering ordering a custom gown, watch this episode first. My name is Dani Walker. I'm a pageant coach and a former Miss Montana USA. So if you enjoy pageant content, travel, or sustainable fashion, please consider subscribing and hitting the notifications bell. If you're preparing for a competition, I have linked my free pageant prep course in the description. And if you'd like to support the channel in other ways, you can do so by hitting that super thanks, shopping in the merch store, or sharing the episode with a friend. First things first, you need to know that there are pros and cons to ordering a custom gown, and that custom gowns do come in all price ranges. I've worn different custom gowns from different designers, and also I work regularly to style pageant contestants, which means that I work hand in hand with contestants and designers to help them create their dream gowns. As you might imagine, I've had some success stories, but I've also had some gown horror stories. That's why I created this episode. I want you to be aware of the pros and cons so that you can be best prepared to find a custom gown if that's what you really want that is going to make you happy. So I'm going to talk to you about what you can expect from different designers. First, I'm going to start with our lower end custom order gowns. These are typically referred to as made to order gowns. You might find a made to order designer on eBay or on Facebook. That's a common place to find these designers. And you can find styles that might range from $100 to $500. And you might think, wow, what a deal. And it can be. I have worked with contestants who have worked with designers like this that are offering pieces at a lower price point, and they've had some success with these pieces. But I've also had some disaster stories. So if you're going to be working with a designer and that price point is between $100 to about $500, that typically means that they're going to be using synthetic fabrics or fabrics and materials that are of lower quality than if you had worked with a designer that it's going to design you something custom for thousands of dollars. So for these lower price points, I want you to really manage your expectations and what you're going to get when it comes to quality. When you're working with these designers, you can send in your custom measurements and they'll make almost anything that you want. But just because they can make almost anything you want doesn't mean that you should order anything. So if you take a Versace dress and you ask them to make that dress, yeah, they're gonna make a version of that dress, but it's not gonna be like the Versace dress that you saw that you loved. I can tell you that because the materials are much more expensive for that couture gown. So when you're creating these dresses, you really gotta keep into consideration the limitations of the skill level and the fabric, and especially the use of stones. One common thing for these designers is that instead of completely stoning a gown or a belt or any embellishment, they will mix beads in with it. This is going to dull the shine of that dress, and it also makes it a lot more affordable. They also typically don't use crystal stones. They will use plastic stones, and these are not going to shine quite as brightly. Now, oftentimes you can call them up and say, could you please upgrade the stone? And they'll usually accommodate you, but it's going to cost you more. The other thing to note about these types of designers is that they're more like seamstresses than I would say designers, because what they're doing is just taking an order. They're taking what you want from a gown and they're making that for you, versus designers who are actually creating collections. Like, they care about their own personal style, the things that make their brand their brand. So that's something you're not really going to get. You're not going to get like a signature look from these made to order designers. Now let's move on towards those higher price points. And I can tell you that the experience working with different designers is going to be very different. But I'm going to give you a few different scenarios so that you have an idea of what might happen. There are some designers who will create a custom collection and they only sell those pieces. They do not make customizations. The only thing that they have available are the pieces that they designed. That is one option for a custom gown style. The next type of designer is more of a hybrid. Yes, they create their own custom styles, but They also will take custom orders in order to deliver what a client wants. Now, a custom order, it might be as simple as just changing a neckline or ordering a gown that a contestant saw that they loved, but in a different color from that designer. Some designers are willing to do remakes of gowns that they already created. I'm gonna give you an example of when I got my evening gown for Miss Montana USA. I actually was working with a gown store, Dress and Party Ohio, which is in Ohio, and they sponsored my evening gown. They gave me a choice of designers. I selected Fernando Wong. We found out Fernando Wong would be attending Miss USA. As it turns out, I was also attending Miss USA that year to watch in the audience. I was able to sit down with Fernando Wong and talk to him about what I wanted in a gown. He did not sketch something for me right then and there. He only asked me about certain things I was looking for, which is kind of funny because the year I competed, there were actually requirements, like we couldn't have a gown that was too low or too sheer or anything like that, or else we weren't allowed to use that gown. So he took all of those things into mind. But because he is a designer, he also kind of threw a lot of my ideas out the window. And that's what's gonna happen when you're working with these designers. They're gonna stay true to themselves. They're gonna stay true to their style. They're oftentimes not gonna give you exactly what you wanted. I told him I don't like white gowns, that I was always first runner-up in them. I also told him I wore red the year before and that I was really looking to wear some sort of a metallic because I hadn't competed in that in years. And he said, okay, so I thought I was getting a metallic gown. Well, weeks before the pageant, I don't have the dress. The dress is being made, so at this point I have no choice, but what they do send me is a sketch of the gown. And at first I was so disappointed because I just thought this is not what I wanted at all. It's not what I envisioned. But then I waited a minute and I thought about it and I was like, you know what, but it's different than what I wore. And I decided I'm gonna allow Fernando's vision to just come to life on me. So I got the gown. I ended up adding some more stones to the gown on my own, and I added chiffon capes and then also more stones to the neck. So I made some further customizations to make sure that the gown really suited my personal style. But that was just one of my experiences. So I want you to keep in mind that, yeah, you might have an idea of what you want, but a designer could have a completely different idea for you. Fortunately, I trusted Fernando. He did an excellent job and I won my title in that custom gown. Another experience that I've had working with contestants is they'll approach a designer that they like and they'll give them an idea of what they're looking for. Like they might tell them, I'm looking for a blue ball gown for my next competition. And then that designer creates 3 to 5 mock-ups of blue ball gowns in a style that suits their personal brand. The designer then will send those mock-ups to the contestant, at which point the contestant says, here's my favorite. And typically you can make subtle changes to those mock-ups, like, oh, like, can we move the strap to the other side? Or can I thin it out a little bit? Or things like that. But overall, you're not gonna change very much about those designs. Those are the options that you are given, and that's that. Then there is another type of designer experience, and this is what happened to me at Miss USA as well as many other contestants. And I was able to basically go into a showroom, try on multiple pieces, narrow down what I liked. I sat down with Sherry Hill. She sketched out what my vision was. We worked together on that. And then she also told me that there were certain things that I wanted in a gown that she just had never done before and that she wouldn't do them. So you can get a designer that's gonna tell you no to the things that you want. And that's exactly what happened to me. So I took the risk, and when I got the dress, it was not what I had envisioned. It wasn't like, it looked like the sketch. It looked exactly like the sketch. But that sketch still just wasn't quite what I had envisioned. So I ended up once again adding more things to that gown on my own. So no process for custom gowns is perfect. And I do want to mention the disasters that I talked about a little bit earlier. So I have had a few clients that have worked with custom designers of all price points, by the way, not just a lower end price point, who designed something, got their piece back, and were very unhappy, or the piece didn't fit, or or it was unwearable. And unless a designer has a return policy, there is nothing you can do. That does not happen very often. I will say that. I've only had a few instances where we've experienced that and we've gone, okay, what's our plan B? What else are we gonna put her in? It's very rare, but it does happen, and I want you to be aware of that. And people say, well, what do I do in that case? Well, you hope that there's more room in the budget to get another gown. So I want you to keep that in mind. Ask yourself, if you feel that there's a designer that it's risky, like a designer that you're not familiar with, a designer you've not worked with before, a designer that none of your friends have worked with before, then you might want to consider thinking, okay, if it goes wrong, do I have more money to get a backup dress? Because interestingly enough, I even had a client that picked a gorgeous gown, and when I saw it, I was like, oh my gosh, why are you not gonna wear this gown? This is stunning. She goes, I can't walk in it. It is so heavy that I cannot walk in it. So it might not even be that you don't like the gown. It might not be that the gown isn't stunning. It might be that you literally cannot move in the dress, and because of that, you can't wear it to compete. You can use it for a photo shoot or something, but you can't compete in it. So those things do happen, and that's why I made this episode. I just need you to be aware of that. But most of the time though, if you do your homework, you do your research, and if you see another contestant wearing a gown from a designer that you happen to love and you want to go to that exact designer, you're probably going to find success there, judging by their previous work. Another thing, if you see somebody wearing a gown that you really like, it's worth a shot. Send them a DM, message them, reach out to them and ask, what was your experience like working with this designer? Would you recommend them? And you can find out like that. Those are really your options for custom gowns. I really hope that this episode is gonna save you a lot of stress in the future when it comes to deciding whether or not to go the custom route. And if you want more tips like this, and if you're interested in preparing for your competition, then please be sure to follow the channel. I have an entire playlist dedicated to pageant prep. And I would also really encourage you to check out my pageant recaps. Those are filled with a lot of useful information for contestants. So stay up to date on those as well. Thank you so much for joining me though for this episode, and I really look forward to creating lots more for you just like it. Be sure to leave your requests for new episodes in the comments below.